welcome to Conversations with Reverend G. I am Reverend Grenetta Mason, aka Reverend G, and I'm here every Monday night bringing you conversations with guests from all walks of life with different perspectives and different careers. And we come together and we share about what we're doing in hopes that we can touch, move, and inspire you. I'm here live every Monday night, 8 p.m. with WEMS Radio. We're on Facebook, we're on YouTube, and we're on Twitter and Twitch. So you can find me there with Conversations with Reverend G every week. And my goal is really to support you in living your best life. Enjoy and with grace and ease. There's so much going on out there in the world, and there's so many things that we have to face day by day, and finding that joy can sometimes be a challenge. On my show, we talk about love, we talk about life, and we talk about spirituality. We talk about spirituality from a practical point of view. How does it support you in your everyday life? And if you've been following my show, you'll see that we've come up with some very creative ways of using spirituality and tapping into our creative spirits to support us during times when we need clarity, peace, all the things that we strive for. So we come together on Monday nights and we talk about how life works for us, and we hope that you're inspired. You can find me every day actually with daily affirmations. I'm on Facebook as Reverend Grenetta Mason, and I'm on Instagram as Rev Grenetta. I'm excited because I have a guest tonight, Liz Wolf, that we met in 1990 something, a long time ago. And it's so exciting when you can meet up with people and come back together and share. So Liz is a business coach for entrepreneurs. She's a professional speaker, and she just does a lot of great things to support people in, living their best life, making their next moves. Hey, Liz, how are you?
So much for having me on the show. Isn't this fun?
I know, right? I'm excited to have you here because I think about when we met, it was LifeSpring. And for me, that was like one of the most important periods in my life. And I carried that. So I changed so much, right? And just stepped into being so different from that 1990s period to in LifeSpring. And as we moved on, I moved on into momentum, and I'm still doing that. And I'm pretty excited, about just always being in a space of transformation. I go and I was like, there's always more that I can do. There's always this new space that I can be in. And each time I go in with the spirit of like, what's new? What's next for me? And how can I use this type of training to support me in those next moves? And also, I love that it's business, it's personal, it's just like your whole life, right? That you get to tackle. So I'm excited to have you here. And we just have so many different things we could talk about, right? So, all right. So since I started with all the whole transformational thing, let's talk about for you, how did you get in LifeSpring, and where has that taken you in the whole realm of transformational coaching? And
Yeah. Well, thanks for asking. I am not sure how much you've shared with your guests about your LifeSpring experience or how much you talk about momentum. I
oh,
was
hi, look at me. Go ahead.
It was actually 1989 that
Okay.
I took my first personal development workshop. And, at that time, there really wasn't a lot that was out there in the world. In other words, like now you can do law of attraction, and you can do
Right.
yoga, and you can do, transcendental meditation on the top of a mountain. But at
Right.
that point, there was really not very much like that. And my punchline on that whole experience, and for anyone thinking about doing any transformational experiences, It's why I have a business today, why I'm as successful as I am. And it's 100% absolutely with certainty that I am married. Not only did I get married, because that was a big thing at the time,
Mhm.
but I just celebrated 26 years of marriage.
Mhm.
Yeah. So,
Mhm.
my family history is every adult in my mother's generation, my mother's and father's generation, was
Mhm.
divorced when I was growing
Mm.
up.
Mm.
So there was only one couple and they didn't have kids. So, that was like maybe that's why they didn't get divorced.
Right. Right. But being in that environment, I could see one of the goals was to really create a partnership. In 26 years, I'm like, great, hats off, right? For 26 years, because that takes a lot. We talk about
Yes.
communication and being with other people, and we talk about relationships and how that works. So I'm sure you had to, get rid of a lot of things that you knew weren't true, even to be able to be in a relationship, after being in such an
Absolutely.
environment. Yeah.
Right. When I was growing up, my mother used to say to me, "You can't trust men." That was literally words that she would say to me. So
Mhm.
I grew up in an environment where I thought men weren't trustworthy. So if I were to enter a room of people with men
Mhm.
in them
Mhm.
as a single woman, who do you
Mhm.
think I was going to find? I was going to find like the one guy that was
Right.
untrustworthy, even though
Right.
or I was going to work really hard to prove myself right that he
Mhm.
wasn't trustworthy.
Mhm. Mhm.
When I saw that belief, we live in a complex world of beliefs. That's everything around us is basically our belief system. We
Right.
look
Right.
out through the windshield of life, we see what we want to see, and it's all based on our beliefs. And so I just kept being right over and over again that the men that were in the world were
Yeah.
not trustworthy until I noticed and recognized it as a belief. That is life changing when you see what you think is true is really a belief.
Exactly. And that is so interesting when we talk about beliefs, because we form these beliefs from early on. Things that we see, things that we experience, we create a belief about the world and about people, and we live through that. We keep seeing that same thing until we can recognize, and then we'll attract, as you say, which men did you attract, right? Because that was what you put out there also. Yeah. So and one of the things too that's important about what we're talking about is being able to say, let me figure out what my beliefs are. How many people do that though? How many people stop and say, wait a minute, right? Let me see what I believe and how that impacts my world, right? How are my beliefs playing out in my life? And that's one of the things that I think transformational or this way, any kind of work, right? Even therapy, whatever you want to do, can support you in going within and saying, well, what do I believe? Because I bet if we took a survey, how many people really start to look at their beliefs and address them in a way to say, well, that's not true, or let me get rid of that, or how this belief
Yeah.
is
It's
impacting my life.
it's so true for us. We live it every day. One of I do a variety of workshops and things around mostly about creating abundance, and that relates in business.
Mhm.
And one of the exercises that we do in my signature workshop, which is called the Abundance Breakthrough Course,
Mhm.
is I ask people to think about what experiences show up for them repeatedly. And
Mhm.
when you think about what experiences those are, then you would ask yourself, why do those exist? Because we don't usually do that. We usually say that experience is out there and it's happening to me. And if you
Mhm.
can turn it around and say, oh, wait, I'm the common denominator here. What am I getting to be right about
Mhm.
other people, and how that could be a defense mechanism? It could be some, like my mother, honestly, I think she was trying to help me. I don't think she
Mhm.
was being, mean.
Right,
I think she was
right, right.
like, "Be careful, you're
Mhm,
a
mhm,
child man, be careful."
mhm,
But you could
mhm,
see how I would take that on as a little girl,
mhm.
grow
Right,
up in a world,
right.
and
I think I hear what you're saying, because I think my mother has something around men, all men cheat, right? And that was, now that you're saying that, I'm kind of remembering that was kind of a theme too, right? And to dispel all of that and to be able to to even trust after, you would think that somebody would say, think that and put that in your head, you know? So those beliefs you really have, and as you said, we work hard to not. I don't attract cheating men, right?
Right. For
Because
someone,
I know that's not true for the whole world. Now they do cheat, right? But
some men cheat, some men don't.
yeah,
Some
right,
men cheat, some women don't. You know,
exactly,
and when
exactly.
you, and when you say, I don't want a man who cheats, or I don't
Mhm,
want a, I don't want a man I can't trust. It's
mhm.
a very weird thing. The universe
You're gonna
here,
get that, yeah,
who cheat, men who cheat, men who cheat, or women who, whatever.
right.
So we just
You
want
have to
to about
switch it around and talk about what you want as opposed to what
right.
you don't want, because you'll still get it if you think that, if you speak it in that way. And I think we've had that, we know that experience of attracting what we say. Words are really important. And I can think back to even growing up in the church and how they used to talk about watch your words because your words make a difference. I've seen over time how that really plays out, and it's very important what you say and what you think. Um, and as I thought about that because I think about how we develop our beliefs and how we grow into the people that we are. So I love the idea of the abundance, right? You think I was like jumping around, right? Give us a little bit about the abundance training that you do.
That is really where I started to getting into my, well, out of the LifeSpring / momentum / personal development world. What, I grew up poor, basically. You would
Mm-hmm.
definitely call me poor. I grew up on a farm, actually, a sheep farm. And my mother and father got divorced. And so, often divorce leaves people in financial challenging situations. So I grew up, rather poor, as it were, and not and uneducated about money. I really didn't know. And even though my father was diligent about money, he was very much like, this is my responsibility as the man, to make the money. And he was very secretive about it. So, and my mother didn't know anything. She was just writing checks. And, remember the old days when you wrote a check and it bounced,
Right, exactly.
and then that was like a big thing. So I really didn't know much about money, really, and I didn't understand it. However, I had this dichotomy because I was living in this extremely abundant, lush environment. A farm is like, you plant tomatoes, they grow tomatoes.
Mm-hmm.
We had 300 sheep. You want a sheep, you got a sheep.
Right.
So it wasn't until I got to actually in my church, I we have a beautiful building on 76th Street in Central Park West, and people were talking about selling this building because we were in bad financial shape. And you have these moments of inspiration. So I happened to be very active in the church, and I stood up and I said, in one of these meetings, you have the big congregational meeting, right? And I stood
Mm-hmm.
up and I said, the only difference between scarcity and abundance is how we think about it.
Mm-hmm.
And the way, because we were talking about selling part of our building.
Mm-hmm.
And this was obviously a big decision. And so I decided to write a talk. They sometimes have lay people come in and do talk. So I
Mm-hmm.
wrote a talk, 3 spiritual laws of abundance. And those are: number 1, to ask powerfully; number 2, to give wholeheartedly; and number
Mm-hmm.
3 is to receive graciously. And
Mm-hmm.
those 3 things are things you can always control in your life. It's always something you can take action on. And
Mm-hmm.
that's where you can be responsible for your own experience around abundance. If you want something, ask for it. Ask for what you want, not for what you don't want, like we just
Right,
talked about.
exactly.
If you feel like either you're unclear or you don't like asking, whatever, you can always start the cycle of abundance by giving. You could give money, but you can also give away, clear. Who couldn't use a closet clean out these days? Everybody,
Right.
right? I
Mm-hmm.
leave stuff out on my stoop all the time. People come. It's
Mm-hmm.
so satisfying. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not just about giving money. It's also about, even if you want clients, help somebody else get clients. So there's ways you could give. I could talk about this stuff a lot. And then the receiving part is very hard for people. Everybody's like, no problem, I can receive. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to offer you $5 for gas. Are you going to say yes or no?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to give you a compliment. Are you going to say thank you? Or are you going to say, oh, this haircut? Oh, I so need a haircut, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
so many ways that we push abundance away.
Mm-hmm.
So I created those steps, which came to me through inspiration and the help of my incredible sister. And I gave a talk at the church, and that set in motion
Mm-hmm.
a whole new experience there. That I started doing a 1-day workshop, and then I turned it into a bigger workshop, did it at the church, and then I started inviting people. And now I mostly focus on helping entrepreneurs, mostly people that want to start businesses or
Mm-hmm.
solopreneurs that are trying to grow their business. And I say, look, get rid of the old stuff that you're so used to. Like, you got to work really, really hard, or you got to know the right people. Like,
Mm-hmm.
there's so many ways that we limit and restrict ourselves
Yeah.
on things you don't have control over. So these are 3 things you do have control over:
Mm-hmm.
asking, giving, and receiving. And you will start to see that cycle of abundance show up.
Wow. And those are really simple steps. But as you say, how many people really ask? For, even down to when I think about it, I'm thinking about, so you ask the universe in making a declaration about what you want.
Yeah.
But also, I also think about, if you need support, how many people are willing to ask for support? A simple thing like that, they're willing to, like you say, do it on their own, right? And giving and receiving is pretty hard. I've seen that many times, where people really are not even comfortable receiving or don't know how. So I like those 3
Yeah.
ways of looking at how to experience more abundance in your life. Right.
Yeah.
That's cool. You also, so let's talk a little bit about your business for coaching entrepreneurs.
Hmm.
And is this the principle of it? Because I read one of your things is that you say you help them get unstuck, right? If they're stuck. So are you like do startups, and then you do people who are wanting to grow their business?
Yeah. So the thing about starting a business, I basically was entrepreneurial my whole life. I didn't have a choice. My mother said, you will spin wool at this festival in front of these people while I talk about wool. And we used to bring sheep to these festivals and shear
Wow.
them and spin the wool. And we sold, we made products like sheepskin slippers and yarn, and we did all this stuff. And so I was sort of thrust into that. It was survival for us. I was really thrust into that.
Mm-hmm.
And meanwhile, my father was 45 years at Westinghouse, essentially the same job
Okay.
as
Okay.
an engineer.
Mm-hmm.
So I had these 2 very different, my mother, hustling over here, and my dad being very deliberate.
Mm-hmm.
But when I tried that deliberate route,
Mm-hmm.
I realized, it's stifling, boring. And a lot of people really feel stuck in this 9 to 5 world.
They oh.
Interestingly,
Mm-hmm.
the pandemic shook that up a little bit.
Exactly. That's what I was going to ask you, because I'm sure there was a difference in your business and now what we're seeing.
Absolutely, because
Mm-hmm.
people are seeing, well, first of all, so many people are working from home or more remote, and they're like, why am I commuting an hour and a half every day? Or, and then this message comes across of what I'm helping. I'd rather be building my own business than helping somebody else build their business.
Yeah.
Now, I will tell you, I have no issue with people that love, and there are people that love the corporate life and they love their jobs. Great. There's a whole other group of people that says, I have an idea, or I really want to do something else, and they're afraid. They really have a lot of fear, as many of us do, fear to take action. Do I quit my job? Do I not? How do I make money? You don't know anything about sales. You don't know anything about marketing, any of that stuff. So one of the inspirations that I have for doing the work that I do is my mother, because she was a terrible business person. Terrible. I talk about bouncing the checks. Not just that, she just didn't know how to manage her money. She didn't know, she was kind of pretty good at marketing, but it wasn't very effective. So of course this is way pre-internet and CSAs and all the things we have now. So I always think if my mother had someone like me that she could talk to regularly and give her sound advice and tell her how to budget. I mean, I don't do business plans per se, but tell her and have her, say, don't invest in this here. Did you work on that? There's so many ways that I help people to stay accountable, just to get over that first hump, that scary first hump when you really want to start a business. Sometimes people get into business and then they also get stuck because they kind of jumped into the pool on the deep end and they're like, was I supposed to know how to swim?
Right.
I had to swim. What? Help. So it's still that stuck feeling that people have of how to create the free time and money freedom and express your creativity and authenticity. And that's really what I want to help people do.
Oh, that's really cool. What came to my mind is I think about I'm at retirement age, right? And at this point, I still feel there's so much to do. Retirement from my job, but that just also means going into whatever I want to do whenever I want to do it, right? And there's the idea of what's next, and I think there are a lot of people in this same role, like looking at, it's retirement time, so what's next for me, right? And whether it's like I have Reverend G and I'm building all that and what that looks like, but I'm doing it with grace and ease, I'm flowing into it. Sometimes, my mind thinks, are you not doing enough? But at a point, I said everything that I do is enough, and I get to choose whether I want to do more. So once I got really comfortable with whatever I'm doing is enough, right? Then I felt like anything more, then I get to choose what's next. But there's just this whole group, I think, on that verge of wanting to, can retire, can leave corporate, wanting to, but really, what's next.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I wasn't aware that people are retired at 45. So that's weird.
Some people do, the lucky ones, right?
Like you. Those lucky ones like you. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, so retirement is such an interesting concept. And you have to know that this type of living that we have is very new in our existence as human beings. Nobody talked about retirement, in the year BC 10,000. Like nobody talked. There was not even as recently as sort of the early part of even the century or last century, or when feudal times and stuff. People just worked, but you weren't. There's this model of going, and there's a sense of security and safety, like you're going to go, and then you go there, and then they give this money, and then you go home, and then you have the money, and then you have the separation of the time that you're doing the work versus the time that you aren't doing the work, and have money to do with, right, to pay for the things you're doing when you're not working.
Right.
So actually, I use my mother-in-law as an example. She worked pretty much till she was 70, and the only reason she really quit is because she one of these like turnover type of things of the company, whatever. And then she stopped working. But she used to say, I can't quit. I can't stop. I got to work to support the lifestyle I want. And I would sit there with her in her beautiful home in Queens, which she decorated so lovely, in this beautiful garden that she had with roses everywhere. And I would say, maybe if you just retired, you wouldn't have so much stress, and then you would be able to sit in your backyard and enjoy, and you wouldn't be so driven to want to make money to support a lifestyle, to combat the lifestyle that you have from 9 to 5 or 10 to 6 or whatever hours you worked every day. So we have this idea that we're going to work really hard to a certain point, and then we're going to stop working. And then what? And then we're going to be retired. I don't want to say anything, but a lot of people die kind of soon after they retire. I mean,
right. It's an interesting word, right? And every time when I use it, I say retire from this job that I'm doing now, right? Not from, no, and I get what you're saying about what the word brings up for people, what it means. And you're right, we have been conditioned to, we're going to work, we're going to have this amount of money, and then we will retire, right?
Right.
And it just doesn't always work like that, right? But I'm great. I feel that I have a job that I really can live my best life.
That's wonderful.
And so that works out for me. So let's talk about your spiritual journey. You grew up. So when you were doing the sheep and all that, where was this? Where we live? I'm fascinated by that, right? Because I don't know anybody that.
You don't have any people with the last name of Wolf that lived on a sheep farm?
No. Right. That was the real name, Wolf, and you lived on a sheep farm. I swear, that's really cool, right? What about, as you were growing up, what about your spiritual religion? Did you guys go to church? What happened there?
Yeah, that's great. Well, actually, my mother was raised Catholic because she's Italian, and my father was raised, I want to say Presbyterian. I'm not 100% sure. And as happened in the 50s, when you married outside of your faith, they actually kicked you out, which is really dumb. Like that was dumb. Why would you kick out one of your children, right?
Right.
Okay. But they did that. And my mother had been raised in this very, relatively conservative world, and my father had been raised also in this. But he, as a as a scientist and as a man of reason, etc., he sort of tried it on for size, and it didn't do much for him. So what together they did in Pittsburgh. So this is I grew up in Pittsburgh, which is actually quite a vibrant place. I think it's one of the largest Jewish populations in the country, other than New York City. But very mixed, a lot of mixed different things. Anyway, there's a Unitarian Universalist church there, a couple of them. And my mother, it was interesting. She said, my oldest sister was being sent to a Jewish preschool, and she came home one day at age like 3 and said to mom or dad, I don't remember exactly who, but was like, she said, am I Jewish? She didn't know, exactly how. Am I Jewish? And that's when my mother and father realized, okay, it was confusing for her, right? She wasn't Jewish, but there wasn't much else going on. So they started going to the Unitarian Universalist Church. And I don't know if you're familiar with the Unitarian Universalist Church, but it's a liberal religion, and it's a very welcoming environment. It's a lot of people who, I don't think they really kick you out of the faith anymore, but a lot of people who either were Jewish and Catholic or something, interfaith marriages will come to that church because it embraces the spirituality of many different sources.
Right.
And so, the other thing, it's a little misleading because they'll say you can believe whatever you want, which is actually not true. The point is, you can choose how you believe. is really what it is. There's no doctrine that's said this is the truth, the light. There is a way in which it's about exploration and choosing. So there are actually Christian UUs, there are Jewish UUs, there are atheist UUs, there are earth-centered UUs. And the principles that we aspire to are really more around the inherent worth of human beings and inclusivity and democracy, the principles of democracy. And so it can be a pretty mixed bag of experiences. So that's the liberal faith that I was raised in. And I am as I've raised my children there, and this church on 76th Street in Central Park West. And my husband was born or raised Catholic, and he and I go to his churches. So we both can find spiritual meaning there at the church through that.
That's really cool. So you have kids. What was the experience like how do your kids having kids when pre-COVID, after COVID, and how is that all going? Are they college or?
So my daughter was somewhat fortunate in that she was a junior in high school when they all had to stay home for the year.
Okay.
So she was able to go back to school for her senior year. My son, she's 18 now. My son was in college, and interestingly enough, a SUNY school, they allowed the kid, well, they sent them home at first, right? But then they said you can come back. But the way they did it was all the classes were online. So you were at this college, but you couldn't do anything except sit in your room and go to class.
Right. Okay.
So we just brought them home. We just brought him home for that time. He's there now. It's pandemic's not over, but we're trying to make the best of it now. So they fared fairly well. I mean, my son is more introverted than my daughter. That was hard on her in high school to not be able to see her friends, and yeah, it was a lot of staying at home.
A lot. Yeah, I think we all did a lot of staying at home during that time, right? You're a public speaker and you're a writer. Have you always been a writer, or is this just something apart as you started to do the trainings and speaking?
Well, there were two things I imagined I would do when I got older, and neither one of them was be a sheep farmer.
I still get fascinated by a sheep farmer. And wait, let's first. How did you get away from being a sheep farmer? So did you go to college right after you turned 18, and then that's how you got away from it?
Yeah, it's interesting because it was always expected that we would go to college because we were like a city family, and my mother was a teacher before she had kids. She was this educator. So it was always expected that the three of us would go. I have two older sisters, would go to college. They were, because I was the youngest, I was on the farm the longest. Right after college, I decided that in Connecticut, in South Norwalk, there's a street that is like they call it SoNo, which is South Norwalk, which is like Soho, but SoNo. Right. So I actually opened a little shop, and I was selling the sheepskin and other products that my mother was making on the farm. I sold in this shop. And I think it was my way of alleviating my guilt for abandoning my mother and not going back to the farm. And that is not a reason to have a business, and it did not do well at all. And I think I had the little shop open for like 9 months. Didn't know how to run a business. Didn't know anything about it. Could have used a coach like me. I mean, not that people weren't helping me, but could have used a coach like me to learn about how to sell and price things, and maybe even coach me to not do it to begin with.
Because I was going to say, in a lot of people say, "Oh, I have this great idea. I want to do this business." What have you seen? What kind of things? I mean, I know it would take a whole longer than the time we have on this show, but what are some of the key things they should think about when they say, "Oh, I have this great idea and I want to run a business"?
Yeah. Number one, you're right. You do have a great idea and you should run a business. Number two, hire a coach. They will help you.
Right? Okay.
Uh, Number three, have a plan. You know, my favorite story that I say about when I say have a plan, I always think of this. My best friend from high school, she married a lot younger than I did. So she had kids. She had kids that were like my son was like 6 and her son was already, 18 or 19. And so when I would go to her house, she still lives out in Western PA. So I'd go to her house and there'd be like teenagers lying around. And the, Joey, her son, would yell up the steps, "Okay, Mom, we're going out." And she would yell down, "Where are you going to go?" And he said, "I don't know." And she says, "Have a plan." Because they say teenagers get in trouble when they don't have a plan.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And so I thought I always hear her voice, that's what I want to yell at all my new entrepreneurs. Have a plan.
Right.
And
Yeah.
now, again, as a coach, that's what I help people do is to create the plan. But with or without a coach, what is your plan? What's the how you gonna you got to have a financial plan, you got to have a sales plan, a marketing plan, got to think through things. Now, some people do it more like the side hustle way where they're growing it to the point where they want to
Take
transition.
it. Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. I saw where you also do like social media marketing strategy.
I do because that's part of what we do. Now, I don't consider myself a social media marketing strategy expert. There
Okay.
are
Yeah, because I say that when I saw that, I was thinking about it because it's so different now, right? And looking to, even for me, I really want somebody to do it for me, right? Rather than having to do it. So I got to think abundantly about the funds to pay somebody, right, to do it
Yeah.
for me, right, as opposed to doing it. But I came up in a whole different era around marketing and sales and all of that. And now we're into this whole social media era, right? Of what's your strategy and what's your plan. So that interested me too because I don't necessarily know that I have a plan. I kind of do, and I kind of don't, right?
Right. Well, the just quickly on this topic, here's an example. So first of all, there's a lot of social media. There's LinkedIn, there's Facebook, there's Twitter, there's name 6 others,
Right,
TikTok.
right.
Yeah, I'm sure I haven't named all of them. Okay, yeah. Instagram. So first of all, if you don't hang out there already, you're not going to want to hang out there later. Like LinkedIn, nothing against it, but I find it kind of boring. Like go on
It's
there.
the business one.
Yeah, like,
Yeah.
and people keep saying, "Oh, you're a business coach. Go on there. It's gonna be business people. Isn't that a perfect place to hang out?" And I go, "Okay, let me go hang out there." And then, do you ever go to like one of those parties where all the conversations are so boring and you don't know what to do? And they're like talking about stuff you don't care about, and you keep moving from group to group to group.
Right.
And somebody will be talking about something that's interesting to you. That's how I feel about LinkedIn. Like, I'm sure those people are very, they're engaged and interested. If it's not authentic to you, you're not going to go there. You're not going to want to post.
Right.
So the first most important thing I think about social media is if people go to your social media and they don't see anything on there, they're going to be like, okay, this person's not doing anything. So the first reason to get on social media at all is so that it's like lead verification. So people are going to come in and say, Oh yeah, Conversations with Rev G. Yeah, look at that. She does it consistently every Monday. It's showing up. There's nothing sadder than a Facebook feed or a LinkedIn feed that doesn't have anything on it. You know, you see these people that don't even put pictures up. Like, put a picture up. You know, make it presentable. And the other analogy around this that I like to share with people is you have to think of social media like one of three things. It's either a dog, a cat, or a houseplant. Okay. Okay.
Okay.
If it's a houseplant, you're going to water it once in a while. You're going to make sure that it doesn't die. You're going to
Right.
give it a little food. Okay. But about once a week.
Yeah.
If it's a cat, you don't have to walk the cat, but you have to feed the cat. You have to feed the cat. You got to change the litter box. You got to make sure that he's not peeing in your guitar case like my cat was about to do earlier today. You know, so you got to be watching. But you can also go away overnight and not worry about the cat. Okay. And nothing bad is going to happen. But you do requires a little more attention. But if you really want to make your social media be, you know, a lead generation source, you got to treat it like a dog. You got to walk the dog, you got to feed the dog, you got to pet the dog, you got to pay attention to the dog. You got to do that several times a day, multiple times a day. You don't just walk your dog in the morning and go, okay, I'll see you tomorrow, right? Now, I don't have a dog for that very reason. I have a cat, and I have a couple of plants that I remember to water once in a while.
Right.
Okay. So social media is like that. You got to pick the type that you like, and you got to decide how you're going to be with it. And if you just want to have a houseplant, that's okay. Just know you're not going to generate anything from it.
Yeah, I really like that because you can, it's easy to think about which one you want to do, right? And how you want to really engage on social media. And it depends too on what you're looking for, because I've always been in all of them, because I've been in technology. My whole career was technology, right? And so when any new technology came about and all that, I was always in it to look at it and see what's going on. And so I'm on all of them, right? I haven't necessarily. I think I did my first reel today with the post from us, the one I posted.
Oh, yeah.
It was a reel. I was like, oh, it's a reel, right?
I saw it. It's gorgeous. Yeah.
You know, so definitely been involved, looking to, you know, see what will be the next level of involvement. Because I really am practicing grace and ease. Because I do remember like running up against everything. When I worked in corporate, it was just like I was running on this treadmill. And my message when I coach younger people is you don't have to do all that. You really don't have to run yourself to death. You really don't have to do it the hard way. And that's what I say, grace and ease. And one of the things that I practice, and I always talk about, give yourself some grace and take it easy. It doesn't have to be hard. And I've learned that over time. That's why I can talk about it at this point, you know, and know that what I've learned is just deciding what you want, declaring what you want. Is really basically around the things you were talking about, the ask, the giving, and receiving. It's all the same kind of things, because it's really about deciding what you want, not all the doing, just being about it, and then making the right action. It's not no action, but if you sit with it, then you'll make an inspired or a right action, or an action that'll take you to the next level. But if we're just running around doing, you know, we're not necessarily getting where we want to be. So that's one of my big things, is really around grace and ease and how we're living our lives. So I also saw that you have a BFA. What are you doing? And I heard you mention the guitar, and I was like, oh, I want to talk about your creative side. What kind of things do you do? Because and we'll get to talk about your spiritual practices, but I found that people's creative endeavors become part of their spiritual practices. And I've always thought, like I talk about, I don't even know if I mentioned it today because every time I talk about the spiritual toolkit, what's in your spiritual toolkit, right? And it's become a huge box, right, of things that it's personal to you, but you can use them when you're in crisis or when you need a bit of joy or when you need to change anything. What are your go-tos? I talk about this whole past 2 years in the mental health crisis. We were all I always say there's a thin line between sane and insanity, and we step on the same line, all of us, and we can tip this way or we can tip that way, right? So what is it and what do we use to really stay on the same side? And a lot has been going on. I think I've said a whole lot right now. Did I ask you a question?
Yeah, well, I think you wanted to know about my guitar playing.
Yeah, right. And I went into the whole creative thing.
Yes, you're right. I mean, as you speak, so music is one of those unfulfilled. Actually, what I didn't tell you about the story is when I left I did that shop, and then when I left the doing that, I was in Connecticut, and that's when I moved to New York City because I was interested in pursuing music. Again, knew nothing about it.
Mm-hmm.
I was a singer. I am a singer. I sing quite a bit. I was actually a very good dancer too.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, let me go do that. Let me go do music and dance in New York City. Didn't know anything about it. Nothing. Had people tell me, oh yeah, your voice is great. You'd have what it takes. I kept like going. There was a little spark and then it would go out. And so I kept moving from thing to thing. That's about the time when then I started doing the life spring trainings, and then ended up starting a business, and I did all that. And something that I always wanted to do was learn how to play the guitar from when I was a kid. And for a while, I thought it was because I wanted to be a performer, but I've eventually come to realize that music is the reason I liked watching and wanted to play the guitar is because it tended to happen in circles of people in community singing together. And so, but I never learned. And so finally, Thomas Cubby, do you know him? I don't know if you know him. He's in the Momentum PD world. He said to me, "Here, learn the ukulele. Only 4 strings. Show me a couple chords." Little did I know how easy that was. I started playing that. I started playing bluegrass music, which again I knew about, and I loved it, but I had never played it or sung it. And I started going to bluegrass jams, and bluegrass is a community-based experience for the most part. It's when you go to a bluegrass jam, it's a welcoming, especially slower jams. Faster jams, they're a little more particular, but the slower jams, which by the way, I now run slow jams in New York City. I have a tomorrow night in case anybody wants to come. And so because it became, I have a whole professional career now, so I'm not interested in having music be the the center of me earning any income, but it has had me grow in so many other ways. So now not only do I play the ukulele, but I am now taking a guitar class at City College, which is right up the hill from where I live. And in fact, I applied to their Bachelor in Music degree.
Wow.
Not hard to get in. So if you want to get in, if you want to, you already have a Bachelor of Fine Arts, which is in actually photography.
Oh.
It's another whole story, but you probably don't have time for it. I don't have to do like the math and the English class and stuff. And so this semester, I'm taking 1 class a semester, and this semester I'm taking a guitar class. And in the spiritual abundance realm, I had to have a guitar to take a guitar class, which I didn't have. And so I said to one of my bluegrass friends, this is like maybe a couple weeks before the class started, I was like, I'm taking this class and need a guitar, like hoping maybe he had an extra one. Or goes, oh, my neighbor's giving one away.
Wow.
And now I have a guitar.
Good time.
And
Yeah.
it's a $600 guitar. It's not a cheapy guitar. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh. And now I play the guitar. Now it took me years of starting with the ukulele and then getting to know people. And now I'm running this jam. So now I bring my guitar to these jams, and everybody's like, oh, Liz is playing the guitar now. They've been wanting me to do it for years.
Mm-hmm.
And so it feels like I'm fulfilling that, but it's really about the community. And that's when I get transported into my that's a spiritual practice that I have. You know, it's very spiritual for me to be singing.
That's great, because you mentioned community, and people want community. And it's really one of the things that most of us want to be in community. And I talk about my momentum community, because that's like a really powerful community for me. And the people that I met are a part of that whole community. So I stay in touch, I keep myself in that community. And as I've talked to people over time, one of the things that was lost during COVID was that sense of community. We were able to, though, via Zoom, right? Kind of still stay together, but it was a little different, from like being in the room and the energy and being around people. And in our training is how we hug everybody and we just love everybody. And I remember seeing one of the people that I hadn't seen for a long time in the store, and we just kind of froze. It was sad, it was happy, because we just didn't know that we could hug each other or do anything. We had our mask on and we just froze, right? And in that moment, I realized the impact of how we used to hug and love each other and all of that. And a lot of that went away. And will we get to move back to that sense? Because even now, for me, I go in my office, I close the door, and I'm very particular. I work at a school. So do I want a bunch of students running up into my office anymore? It's just really adjusting to how to live after this whole COVID pandemic experience.
Wild.
And and just in talking to people and about creating that community again, and not go and work with a community for people. Going to work every day, you see these people 8 hours, 5 days a week. That is your community, and then to lose that, I talk about mental health. I was just on the show on the Bronx Network. It's on YouTube. I'll post it. It was called Mental Health and You. I did a 30-day appreciation, 30 days of just appreciating your life. So I posted every day for 30 days what I appreciated, and I invited people to have gratitude and appreciate every day. And we talked about how the practice of appreciation and mental health, because mental health at the crisis stage that it's in, there are not enough therapists for everybody, because everybody that I talk to is like struggling trying to find one, right? What other ways are we out there that we can support people? And it's through just using some of these spiritual creative practices and getting people to understand them and use them. You have mentioned the music was one of your practices. I love music because it touches my soul. What I generally ask my people on the show to talk about the 3 practices that work for them, because we're talking about things to add to our own personal spiritual toolkit. So what would be music, as you said, is one of yours. And what would be your other 2? You got me interested to listen to bluegrass music. I never ever, so much music, right?
Yeah. I mean,
I have a friend that I went to college with, and I can remember they would go to bluegrass concerts, right?
They're awesome.
And just I have to go and just listen. I'm kind of curious to hear what it sounds like.
I'll see if I can send you some stuff I can remember. So music, absolutely. I would say as far as a spiritual practice, well, obviously the church community for no matter what was and is very important to me. And of course, that was busted up by COVID as well. We're still wrestling with, do we wear masks? Do we not? Of course, we were on Zoom for all that time. So, and it doesn't quite feel the same to come back the way that it is. So that has been, I would say, learning. I'm going to use in the same as my number two, especially in the context of the church, is that experience of exploring ideas and thoughts and listening to different sermons and hearing other people's perspectives and that sort of thing has always been very important to me, and just being in that. The other thing I thought of as far as a practice goes, I don't know if you've ever read Hal Elrod's book about morning, Miracle Morning, I think it's called. He talked, I don't do everything, but it's a great book to get you basically, what are you doing in the morning? What are you doing when between the time you get up and the time that you start working, assuming you're a working person? And so exercise is important to me. Then I do that's when I do a lot of my listening to learning. I constantly listening to books from the library, mostly nonfiction business books, but not only, a lot of spiritual books as well. And just having that space and time, a little conversation with my husband, having, sometimes I make smoothies, sometimes I make coffee, etc. And then coming and centering myself in some way. Could be a little journaling, could be just, sometimes I just sit on the edge of my bed and go, give myself that space and time. Sometimes it's feeding the cat or whatever it is. So that practice has been very helpful. And I know I'm not presenting something new, like, oh, you could do a morning routine. I never thought of that. But are you doing it consciously?
Yeah, and consistently, consciously and consistently, right?
That's right. Are you doing it? Because so many of us have good intentions, or we go to bed the night before going, when I get up, I'm gonna da 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 da. Right. That does really set the tone for you.
For the day. Yeah, I know. I get up early in the morning because it's quiet, right? And the energy is just an energy of peace and quiet, and you could just sit. And I listen to, one of my favorite people is Abraham Hicks. I listen to all of that sometimes. I listen to gospel music. I do my meditation. So it is about a consistent practice that supports you in having your best day. And life is in moments, I say, right? Living each moment, enjoying each moment, and staying present to what's happening in your life is really important. Well, it's been really, really good having you.
Thank you.
Tell people how to get you and what you do again, so that people can reach out.
So again, my name is Liz Wolfe, Wolfe with an E. You can find me online at lizwolfecoaching.com. Actually, if you're interested in, here's the cover of my book, The Power of Asking. And if you are interested in, it's on Amazon, but if you're interested in starting that spiritual practice of asking and shifting your life around that, you can go to my website, lizwolfecoaching.com/ask-book, and you can download it for free. And PDF there, and you can download it for free. And I would love to give that as a gift to your listeners. Yes, it's based on the principles of business, but I didn't start this principle out of business. I started it out of a spiritual practice of creating abundance in my life. And asking is the single most powerful thing you can do to get what you want. So you are welcome to go to my website and download that. And of course, all my contact information is there as well. And I would love to hear from anyone about your ideas. I'd love to hear from people.
Great. Well, thank you, Liz. And it was great connecting. And I will go and check out your book, and we'll be in touch.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for listening.
Thank you for joining me tonight on Conversations with Reverend G. I'm here every Monday night live, WEMS Radio, from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m., bringing you conversations with guests who can support us in being our best selves. You know, my goal is to support you in being your best self with joy, with grace, and ease. You can find me every day with inspirational messages on Facebook as Reverend Grenetta Mason and on Instagram as Rev Grenetta. And I'll see you again next week right here, Conversations with Reverend G at 8 p.m. Have a fantastic week.